Hi, I'm Dr. Aaron Brinen, Assistant Professor of Clinical Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. This webinar was recorded when I was at Drexel University. Enjoy! Today we're going to be really talking about one of the core interventions, or really the core intervention of recovery-oriented cognitive therapy for psychosis, which is activity scheduling. And so we're going to be spending a good bit of time digging in, hopefully digging in a little bit deeper than we get to do in certain webinars, not in certain webinars, but in certain workshops, thinking about it in a little bit more of a sharpened up kind of way. So we're going to talk about it, but we're also going to start by going over sort of the basics and thinking about it in a little bit more of a way. These are meant for information, and I hope that this is really useful. I really encourage everybody to get more training in it if you find that this is really exciting. So activity scheduling, it is the most boring topic to talk about. There's no question about it. I'm going to tell you right now, it's super boring. I'm hoping that today will be a little bit more exciting, but I just can't get around the fact that it's not the most exciting of topics. It's just true. But we're going to talk about how do we use it a little bit more actively, and also recognizing that it's actually a pretty powerful intervention. I think, there's lots of interventions that seem like we're pulling our magic wands out and doing it. Activity scheduling is not that. It's pretty nice and systematic, but it teaches a really great skill to the individuals we serve that they can use as they move forward in their lives. So today we're going to review activity scheduling, really talk about the way there's a part of it which is really about evaluating the activities. And so we're going to talk about that piece of it. It's how do we use it as a data collection source? And then how do we start targeting it, right? Activity scheduling can be really used to target some of the obstacles people might have. So let's start with, the cycle of recovery that we really found when we did the original clinical trial, right? So one of the things we found at the end of the original clinical trial was that as we got people to have increased motivation, they started doing more in their lives, right? They started functioning better. But as they started functioning better, we also found that the hallucinations and delusions, the positive symptoms, went down. But the weird thing about it was, in the clinical trial, it was a clinical trial for negative symptoms, the problems with motivation and the problems with connection. So it was a clinical trial targeting the negative symptoms of schizophrenia, and yet the hallucinations and delusions went down. Like, that shouldn't happen. So that's when Dr. Beck really comes up with this, this model that if we can target motivation, get people motivated, get them doing more and doing more in their lives, we might start seeing a reduction in hallucinations and delusions, which makes you more motivated. Listen, the hallucinations and delusions don't always say really nice stuff to us. So if we're feeling like we're being talked to badly, we're going to not be as motivated, right? So the overview of CTR, right? So the overview of the protocol of CTR really is this sense of using activity in the end as this wonderful behavioral experiment, this experiential learning. So just to remember, we start by activating the individual, right? We're going to do those things that break through, engage people engage people's energy, engage people in this way. Ways that don't pull out this patient mode, right? So we're not going to engage them with, how was your medicine? Have you gone to group? What did you learn in group this week? We're really going to be engaging them more around the idea of things like, so how did you make pita bread? What did that look like? Things like, so your paint, how exactly do you get like the edges perfectly straight? How do you do those types of things? Or, hey, have you seen this video? Check it out, cats with lightsabers. And so we're going to engage people in those things that just naturally kind of wake all of us up. Once we have the individual engaged in, and those beliefs activated around connection, capability, belonging, like volition, once we have those beliefs activated, and the energy and attention and motivation and sort of brain juice goes along with it, that's when we're going to elicit those aspirations, the things they want to be doing, the things that they want to get. So as we start that process of aspirations, that's when we're going to start breaking it down. And we're going to break down this really vivid aspiration that the person has to the things they can be doing right now. So there's sort of two routes that activity takes, right? So one of the routes activity takes is I do something with you, we go for a walk, I notice that it feels better, and then you add it to your schedule during the week. The other one is to start evaluating the activities that you're already doing. But there are certain lessons that you learn as you become more active. And the data that we collect, so things like how activity impacts my energy, start to challenge or start to check and correct the very beliefs that the individual has. And so that's where we're really going to get into using this as a method of cognitive restructuring. During the isolation, all of these symptoms are going to be made worse. So the bummer is activity level might be going down, but the good news is it's almost an experiment to show, right, when we do less, our energy goes down. When we do less, these other problems get worse. So this is sort of the arrow of activation, aspirations, and action. So we're really going to be focusing in on the action component here. So when we're talking about actions, the idea of planning and evaluating and increasing the individual's activity level, right? And we want them to learn really specific things along the way. One of them is that activity, leads to increased energy and increased motivation. We can also have them start noticing the idea that activity is related to decreased psychosis, right? And I think a lot of times people might sort of struggle with that idea, except when I start saying, when you isolate, do your voices go up or down? When you sit bored and don't do anything, do your voices go up or down? Well, the opposite of isolating and the opposite of sitting around doing nothing is doing something and talking with people. So that's activity. So activity is related to decreased psychosis. Busy hands are happy hands, and idle hands are the devil's play tools, essentially. So if you think trite adages is the way that you've always wanted to do therapy, unfortunately, some of them have some really good merit to them. The other piece of it is that action is going to have steps toward the aspirations that the individual wants. And we're not going to focus as much on that today, but it really is a great lesson to learn that when we plan the things that we want to do in our lives, we're much more likely to be successful at doing them. There's lots of research that supports that around motivation. So really what we're ultimately looking for is a schedule of action and a schedule of activities so that we're more likely to engage in those things. And anybody who says that that's not normal, am I doing it because, are we having them do it because they have psychosis or they're schizophrenic or whatever? No, we're not doing that at all. The way I can tell you that I know that that's absolutely not true is I'm going to tell you, this is what my day looks like. Guess what? It's all scheduled out. And guess what? I don't just have this. I have this, right? I have this, right? They're all different things that I have to do. So I have my lists and I have them scheduled so that I'm more likely to be successful in the things that I want to do. So they're not doing it because they have an illness. They're doing it because that's how humans are the most successful. As we start seeing obstacles pop up, we can really focus the action in there. So today, one of the take-home messages is, once we learn the benefit of activity, we can actually fire these routines directly at the problems that the individuals that we serve are having. Ultimately, we want people to learn new lessons. So I think a lot of the idea that we get around is that we focus on cognitive therapy around beliefs that we have about ourselves, right? I'm helpless, I'm worthless, others will reject me. We don't always focus in on the fact that people have learned lessons, right? People have cognition around other experiences. So beliefs like, I can't do it until I get the energy, right? Why try? Things don't work out anyway. It's not really about me. It's not really about other people. It's sort of not even about the future. But we have these beliefs about the symptoms we have. Anxiety lasts forever. There's nothing I can do to stop my voices. So any of those thoughts that we have or any of those cognitions that we have, we can learn about experientially. And it's a really powerful lesson for somebody to learn. Ironically, the individuals who I've served who always feel to me sometimes like they're not getting it, or not that they're not getting it, but that they're not sort of buying into it, or they're not like, their thoughts aren't changing. Those are sometimes the ones where they're the epitome of you sow a seed and the seed will eventually bloom. Because all of a sudden we're having this conversation way deep into a problem, and they start talking to me about, probably if I become active, it's going to work a little bit better. And I go, what? So people have, take these lessons on. So we're really, the first reason we're going to focus in on activity scheduling. And again, activity scheduling can be thought of as the core intervention of recovery-oriented cognitive therapy, right? Because everything that we're doing is about becoming more active and moving toward the things that you want to do in your life, which isn't a bad lesson to learn. And so ultimately, recovery-oriented cognitive therapy, not to make it sound very medical model, but if you were going to say, what symptom is it targeting? It's really targeting the negative symptoms, because the negative symptoms, right, those problems with motivation and problems with connection are the opposite of flourishing, right? So if we think about flourishing's going this way, avolition, asociality, anhedonia, alogia, those negative symptoms, the low motivation and connection is going this way. They're sort of going in opposite directions, right? So flourishing is going out and having a family and going for walks in the park and having picnics and baking pita bread. That's going this way. Well, if I have low motivation and connection, that's going this way. And so ultimately, if we can stop the individual symptoms from dragging them this way, they're going to do much better. It's going to be easier to go that way. Sort of like getting the weights off of your legs before you go for your jog. So the other reason we want to focus on this is that the low motivation and low connection creates a really fertile ground for other symptoms, like distressing voices, worry about persecution, increased stress, reduction in new data. It also gets us a little bit more self-conscious when it is time to speak. So those are beliefs that go along with alogia, right? Thought disorder, any of those things can all be made worse through sort of isolation, not engaging with other people. I always ask this question, and I'm happy for somebody to tell me what the answer is. But like, I go through it in my head, and I struggle to come up with a symptom that gets better with when you isolate and you don't do stuff. Like, every symptom seems to get worse, right? Anger and aggression, self-injury, problems with in a reaction to a trauma, all those things seem to get worse. So that brings us to this idea of this translation of the negative symptoms, right? Because a lot of times, originally, people just thought of them as these sort of holes in the brain schizophrenia, like there's nothing, that their brains just don't work. Beck once said to me, people used to think of it as an obliteration of the personality. So then we're going to start looking at translating of the negative symptoms, right? So there's sort of two beliefs that go along with the problem with motivation. One of them is these defeatist performance beliefs. Why try? It's not going to work out anyway. A little mistake is as bad as a complete catastrophe. And so if you thought that, you wouldn't really be super excited to jump up and go try doing something else, right? That wouldn't be sort of the first thing on your to-do list. The other one, though, is this idea of I can't do it until I get the energy. And that one's that's like an insidious belief, right? Partly because many of us have that feeling. I'll be honest, this morning was our run morning. And I got up before my wife got up, and we were, I was downstairs and I heard her alarm go off, and I thought, I just don't have the energy to do it. Right? I just don't have the energy to do it. And I went, nope. Your energy will come once you run. And I did. I stretched and I went out for the run, and it was definitely worth it. So it's an interesting belief, because one of the truths about it is that activity precedes energy. Energy doesn't precede activity. So it's a lesson. We need to correct that belief, because it's a really problematic belief. And so that brings us to activity scheduling, right? The idea that inactivity leads to low energy and low motivation, but the opposite is really true too, right? That increased activity leads to increased energy and increased motivation. And so essentially we got to get the ball rolling and then the ball will stay rolling. I once turned to an individual I was serving and I said, it's like they say, you know, a body at motion stays in motion and a body at rest stays at rest. And then he turned to me and he said, did you just quote to me Newton's first law? I'm like, I don't know. I never took physics. Sorry. He's like, you did. And I'm like, oh, cool. So it really is that idea. You know, so Newton was right and my mom was right. So everybody was right, except me when I didn't want to run this morning. So it's this idea of we want to get people going. So the other big rationale that we have is that people are happiest and content when they're engaged in 3 types of activities, right? We need a mixture of them in our lives, right? So there's pleasurable activities, so they're the fun stuff, games, hobbies, music, that type of stuff. But then there's masterful activities, right? Those things that make us feel really good, those meaningful things in our lives, right? Those are chores, exercising, working, accomplishing stuff, you know, even paying your bills. When I talk with individuals, I like to differentiate them. I go, listen, do you ever clean your toilet bowl? And they're like, yeah. And I go, is it fun? And they're like, no. Do you feel good at the end of it? And they're like, yeah, you know, kind of got stuff done. You feel like you're, you know, everything's looking better, smelling better, you know, so that's good. So even though it's not fun, you feel better after you're doing those types of things. And then social activities, time with other people. We're social creatures. But the important piece of it is scheduling those things out, right? It makes them more likely to happen. There's, you know, I'm on Facebook, so I get these sort of like weird Facebook things all the time. You know, the 20 ways to be a successful CEO or the 20 habits of the most successful people in America. And every one of them has planning things out, right? Successful people plan things out. They don't just sort of randomly have them happen. And so what we want to do is help individuals notice that, listen, if you want to be more like a CEO, you should plan stuff out. And that's going to be really important for them. So activity scheduling, which is really our focus for today, is the idea of systematically evaluating, increasing, and then monitoring the level of activity in our lives. For many of the people that we serve, we're going to start by really noticing that they're not doing a lot of activity at all. Like, so some of them are going to have lots of days where there's nothing going on. And that might feel really bad for us, but it can actually be some good news for us because it's a really easy comparison point of I'm doing nothing, right? Meaning I sat in my room all day today. And then there's usually a day when they have to go do something. So the purpose, though, is to help people, again, learn that activity leads to increased motivation, energy, and mood, that it leads to decreased psychosis, and that certain activities are going to be lead to less voice hearing. They're going to lead to more energy. So the activity itself can have a specific relationship to the different symptoms that we might be feeling. So one of a nice little way to start this off would be, this is a great form that's in a book that was by Leslie Sokol and Marcy Fox. And I helped to write the chapter on psychosis in it. And it's I think it's called Making CBT Work, or the CBT Clinician's book. It's on my, there's a copy, there's a link to it on my website. And we created this this schedule on it, right? We created this this form on it. And so and it's really about asking somebody, so what's a day when you kind of weren't busy, you didn't have a lot going on, right? And then you find out what day that was, and then write out exactly what they did all day. And then find out, what was a day where you were doing more, right? Where you kind of like, got busy, had to go do chores, stuff like that. You want to write out that whole day. And then at the end, we can look at how did you feel at the end of the day? Things around energy, things around voices, whatever that symptom is that we're targeting, we can do on that day. So here's an example of this intervention in looking at energy. Let's look at 2 days and compare them. So, what day did you not do much this week? Okay, yesterday? All right. So what did you do for most of yesterday? Okay, you're pretty much in your room all day. Okay, that's a good example of not doing much. Well, it sounds like Tuesday was pretty busy. So what did you do on Tuesday? Oh, you started by exercising. That's pretty cool. And then what? Oh, wow. So you walked the whole way? Well, that's pretty cool. That old man is nice. Oh, was he helpful? Okay. Well, that's really cool. Hey, you got to catch up with the crew. That's nice. And then you talked on the phone late at night? Oh, that's really cool too. Wow, that is a busy day. So just to summarize, yesterday, you pretty much stayed at home the whole day. But Tuesday, it seems like you woke up, you got some exercise in. Then you went to the doctor and got a chance to meet with him. And then you met up with some friends a little bit later on. And finally, you got to talk with your team later on at night. Which day did you have more energy? The day where you stayed at home all day, or the day where you had all of those activities? Okay, Tuesday, the day with all the activities. So just a nice, simple way of doing it, but the important part about this learning is that we're drawing it from the individual, right? So if you look at it, I never start the conversation about going, hey, if you do more activity, you're going to feel better. What I really start with is the idea of going, oh, tell me about these 2 days, and go, that's interesting. And then we start noticing on one day they have more energy, on another day they have less energy. And so really helping them to see the relationship between it, but it's based off of their information, not our information. Might you find a person who hasn't done anything all week long? Absolutely. But usually somebody has a meeting or like a doctor's appointment, or their mom makes them go to the store or something. So scratch a little bit and then just see. The other thing, though, is if you find that they have no activity all week long and they have no energy, it supports half of the hypothesis that it seems like when they're not doing stuff that they have no energy. So that brings us to the next way that we can start to build up activity is a lot of that activation. And if you haven't been to other webinars or haven't been to a full CTR training, go back and find some of the webinars around activation, right? So the idea is that we want to help people in session, right? Really notice the connection between doing stuff together and having more energy. And there's a lot of sort of like sneaky ways that we can, not sneaky, but like sneaky ways that we can test this idea out. But we can help them establish the relationship between energy, activity and their energy, activity and whether things are enjoyable or not, activity and whether they're successful in those things, their ability to focus, and even on a relationship with distress. But they don't always have to be fun stuff, right? So people who know me know that I'll do stuff like watching videos with people, throw a ball, go for a walk, look at pictures of or videos of my dog, all of those types of things. But we can also notice the impact on energy if we're doing a lot of work, right? So if we create the whole schedule on the dry erase board, that's activity. And so if at the end of this somewhat boring activity, I have more energy, it's not bad for people to notice, oh, I still have more energy at the end of it. And so again, we can look at a lot of different possibilities for ways to learn, right? So as the individual starts to gain benefit in session, so let's say we go for a walk and the person feels better, has more energy, they might find, I once had a guy describe it as, I feel free. And that was actually his ability to get words out much clearer and much easier. So as they start to feel better, it's like the old ice cream lovers adage, if a little's good, a lot's got to be better. And so, if you really like going for a walk with me, you ever go for a walk with mom and dad? No. I wonder if it would be the same. I wonder if you'd have the same energy. I don't know. And so then let's try it out, but let's plan when we're going to do it. Schedule the time that we're going to do it with the individual. See if it's worth doing during the week, and then if they agree to it, then schedule it. But here's the thing: you don't have to make some like really detailed schedule, right? You could write it on the side of some, on like a little, like a Post-it or something like that. So we don't want to overwhelm somebody with all of this information that we want them to have. Keep it simple. Have a card for them to remember. Set it in their phone to go off, right? Don't overwhelm them, because if we try to get a lot of activity in, we might get no activity in. Better to get one activity in and have them definitely do it than try to do 5 activities and have them not do any of them. If they agree, plan the time, add it to the schedule, and then start planning for ways that they're going to remember and notice the benefit, right? And so that might be that they text you a picture after their walk, if you're allowed to text with your individuals. It might be just sort of keeping track of it. Again, the more digital we go, the better it can oftentimes be, because many of the individuals we serve are ultimately, they might have trouble remembering stuff, and they might have trouble writing it down. But if I set my Fitbit for every time I go for a walk, they'll have those data to evaluate later on. So as we start building up the activity that we're going to be doing, we can start to diversify that activity as well, right? So we want to look at things like making sure that they have pleasurable activities, making sure that they're engaged in masterful activities. So if all they're doing is fun things all day long, right? Playing video games, eating food, stuff like that, it actually is kind of, eventually get really old really fast. There's actually a really amazing quote, I think it's an amazing quote, from Shakespeare, where Shakespeare says, in Henry IV, he says, if all the days were holidays, right? Holidays, to sport, right? To play sports would be as tiresome as to toil, like to work really hard. So if all the days were holidays, to sport would be as tiresome as to toil. And so in that moment, Shakespeare gets it. Just playing all the time makes you really down. It isn't really that much fun after a while. Same thing for masterful activities. If this person's like, well, I got out of the hospital, I'm really serious this time, I'm not going to mess around. And so they're working all the time, and then they're going to group, and then they're reading self-help books. Then they're watching, YouTube videos on how to read, work, and go to group better. They're going to get burnt out, right? Then also making sure that we're scheduling in activities that move toward our goals. It might be everything from like the nuts and bolts that we need to do to get to our goals. The other one can really be around, if my goal is to teach my son how to bake, some goal-directed activities might be me kind of breaking out some of the old recipes and seeing how they work, and get back into baking myself. But baking will also have a number of different side benefits. If I bake enough, one, I might save some money and have money for other things. Two, if I bake, I probably want to give it to some people. When I make pita bread, it's about 8 pita that come out. Well, I can eat about 7, but then one has to go to somebody else. And so really making sure that we, they have a side benefit that they're starting to share it with other people. And then we can really target social activities, right? So things that we can do with other people, making sure that we're scheduling those times in. The last ones are really, we can build up and develop activities and include activities that can counteract some of the obstacles we can face. So things that are like hallucination incompatible activities, right? I can't listen and speak at the same time. And so I might be, include activities about calling my mom and talking to her, or, doing a YouTube video. So that way the YouTube video is time when I'm not hearing my voices. I might be just schedule time in to be listening to music with headphones, which is incompatible with hearing my voices. Same thing for delusion diffusing ones. If I know that the FBI is trying to get me because of the stress in my shoulders, right? We might schedule in yoga. We're not doing yoga because the person has delusions. We're doing yoga because so many people do yoga that I like throw up in my mouth when I hear that somebody's doing yoga. So much yoga that people are wearing yoga pants and aren't even doing yoga. So just as there are things we can include in in the schedule that counteract some of the symptoms people can experience, but not so that we manage somebody's symptoms, but really so they just are doing things that are really normal. I had this wonderful individual I got to serve, just a wonderful human being. And one time during this activity scheduling portion, the person goes to me, Dr. Brinen, why do I have to do all this stuff? Why am I doing all this stuff just for the voices? Just why do I have to do all these things just because of these voices that I'm hearing? And I said, okay, so what things are you doing because you're hearing voices? Well, I got to listen to music and I got to watch trailers on YouTube, and then I've got to play basketball, and then I've got to go have dinner with my parents. I go, dude, what of those would you drop if immediately you just stopped hearing your voices? Like, which of those things would you not want to do? And he sat back and went, oh, I would do all of those things. I said, so I guess the answer is the way that you make these voices go away is that you get to be just totally normal. This person really loved that idea, but it really was this idea of there's all of these very normal activities. That's why anybody who knows me really well knows I really push against the concept of coping skills. I don't really do coping skills. I do sort of like, wellness activities, life things, better to build up stuff. I'm a big music lover, so I don't consider music a coping skill. I consider music something that enriches my life. In times where I've worked really hard and not been able to play music, I find that my life is less meaningful. When I've returned back to singing, I find that my life is more meaningful. That seems to supersede something to help me with my anxiety. So I'm never going to let anxiety take credit for me listening to music. I give that to sort of like a higher power is the reason I get to listen to music. And if it helps make those voices shut up, all the better. So I look much more toward wellness activities. So the conclusion we want to draw from, the conclusion, conclusion is a fancy way or a not fancy way of saying cognitive restructuring. So the conclusion we draw is that hallucinations and delusions are related to the activity. So the more you do, the better you feel. Same thing about energy, right? So energy and activity, right? The more you do, the better you feel. Same thing for things like mood. Different types of activities have different impacts on mood. And also, the more I schedule my activity, the more I make steps toward the things that I want in my life, those exciting things. So one of the specific interventions I want us to focus in on right now is what we call the get up and go routine. So this one is part of the webinar. It's gonna have a little bit of team participation, I hope. So I'm curious for you guys, when you get up in the morning, right? What are the things that get you going in the morning, right? What are the things that get you really fired up in the morning? Walking my dog. Love you, Carly. Music. Oh, Maria, I love that. Eating. Oh, I love that too. So you guys are like these are a few of my favorite things. Coffee. Did somebody just type coffee all the way? Ooh, nature walk. Oh my gosh, Sunny, that's a great one. Okay. So here's my question. When we give our patients a schedule in the morning, what's on that schedule? So if we think about it, right? What we oftentimes patients get told when they're in the hospital, their schedules are around, they're told when you get up in the morning, take your medicine, attend to your ADLs, clean your room, take a shower, get ready for group. Right? Morning routine. I think that's a really great point. I agree, Sunny. It is ooh. So the morning routine. So here's my question. Which of those is going to wake you up better in the morning? Take your medicine, wash your face, brush your teeth, make your bed, or nature walk with your son, walk the dog, have coffee, walk the dog, listen to music. Right, our stuff. And so if we think about the individuals we serve as having a problem with motivation, holy smokes. And remember, the earlier you get the energy going, the more that energy is going to build up. The later you let that energy wait to get started, the harder it's going to be to get to go. So think about any morning you've gone downstairs and said, oh, I'm just going to check a couple emails before I go out for my morning walk. And all of a sudden it's 10 o'clock and you haven't gone for your morning walk. But the morning where you go down and all of your shoes are downstairs, you jump up and you go, oh, I'll just get this thing out of the way. By 10 a.m., you've basically solved world peace, right? So those are the types of things. So what we want to do is hypercharge the morning routines for the individuals we serve. That's music. That's, that's music. That's going out for a walk. That's maybe reading scriptures. That might be playing with the dog, getting their coffee in. Those things that are really going to get their energy going, and then taking that energy and putting it right into productive activity. I'll tell you this. Few individuals that I've served forget that they're supposed to take their medicine in the morning. And so a lot of times when I set up these schedules, they're like, oh, and this is when I can take my medicine. I'm like, okay, whatever. Because the other part that I think we need to be mindful of is that the schedule that individuals come out with a lot of times really can activate that patient mode, really can focus somebody in on the idea that they're inherently broken. Right? So if it's take your medicine, get ready for group, wash your face, brush your teeth, all that stuff communicates is patient, 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 right? Whereas coffee, nature walk, green tea or green tea pill and a nice walk, all of these things, those are the things that are really going to sort of get us going. And it's really about me as a person. If I wake up in the morning and I choose what recipe I want to make later on, it's about the future. It's about hope. It's about energy and excitement. So again, we really want, we want to give them a double shot of espresso for their morning routine. That's figurative, not literal. And so we want to pack in as much energy. A nice, interesting thing is of all the times when individuals talk to me about medicines and have complaints about medicines, trouble getting going in the morning is a frequent time when I turn to the psychiatrists I collaborate with and go, no, let me take care of that one. Because all we really need to do is really pump up the energy early on and really concentrate that energy. And so we can actually get individuals to overcome that morning lethargy by getting things going a little bit earlier. So we can actually do that. So we don't have to, if the psychiatrist wants to play around with the meds and change them, that's fine. But I frequently say if that's the only reason to play with the meds is that they have trouble going in the morning, the get up and go routine is going to be really our go-to for that. Things that are enjoyable, right? Making getting up, going really pleasant and exciting, things that we look forward to. So the routine is a great tool for us to target that energy in the morning. But anytime we do a chain analysis and find that there's a specific time where I have a problem, we can actually target our interventions and develop a routine around it. So if I have trouble going to bed because I'm hearing my voices, we can do sort of a functional analysis about what's going on and when do I start hearing my voices. But we can develop a routine about like a going to bed routine. But if the voices are a problem, or images that they're seeing are a problem, we can develop the routine that are voice incompatible, imagery incompatible, or imagery distancing. So that might include some mindfulness, things like that. Same thing for if I find that when I get home from a day program, all of a sudden I get really freaked out about the FBI being after me. We can find out with a chain analysis why that's happening. But then we can really target that chain and we can really target a routine that's incompatible with the exacerbation of the symptom. So the routines can really become like sort of our real targeted intervention points. They're nice, they're versatile, and they're also really normalizing, right? So if you find that, how many loved ones have we said, they find that when they get home from work, they're really frustrated with work. And then we say, well, why don't we, like, when you get home from work, you get a couple minutes to change. And then do you want to just go for a walk? And they go, yeah. And then they come back and they're calm and they can come and have dinner. Okay, well, that's a routine around anger, right? And so what we do that in our normal life. So routines are quite normal for wellness. It's I think a lot of people do those things. So let's think about how do we use activity scheduling, this same process, for attacking hallucinations, right? Not attacking, but dealing with hallucinations. Um, so when we think about hallucinations in action, activity scheduling provides us this ongoing voice stopping and lessening opportunity. It can provide us some contradiction to what the voice content is saying, but it really starts to test some of the beliefs about voices. Particularly, we're talking about the beliefs around control, that the voices can come and go as they please, right? If I believe that the voices come and go as they please, I'm more likely to isolate and I don't do things. But when I isolate, the voices become more, right? So isolate, I avoid going out, right? And so I hear the voices more, which lets me know that the voices have all of the power in the situation. So here's the nice versatile piece about activity scheduling. We can do the same intervention as we did before, except instead of talking about energy, we're going to talk about voice hearing. So here's an example of the same intervention that I did earlier, but with voice hearing. Which day did your voices bother you less? The day when you stayed at home, or the day when you had all those activities? Right, the day when you had all those activities. Interesting. We should pay attention to that. The same intervention, right? And you can do that for delusions, you can do that for thought disorder. It's essentially, we're going to look at the day when you're not doing anything, the day when you're doing a lot. And the nice thing about looking at them in that very concrete way is we get away from this overgeneralization like bias that we can have where we go, oh, they're always there. But we go, which day were they more? Which day were they less, right? And it's also really vivid, right? The person's seeing the whole day going by. I'm standing by that video. So so the summary of that, of the way that we're going to use activity, right? It's a powerful, powerful intervention. I think a lot of times we want to break out like look, point, name. We want to do a thought record. We want to do exposure. Activity is so powerful. It provides really concrete data that the individual has produced themselves. Activity scheduling is going to be a central intervention. It's partly about building up the schedule, but it's partly about evaluating that schedule as we go along. It provides data for the evaluation points along the way, a really good structure for planning out what's going to happen, and it's really a versatile intervention for multiple problems, right? Hallucinations, delusions, thought disorder, anger and aggression, times of self-injury, problems with motivation, even problems with PTSD, any of these things. Activity scheduling is really versatile to overcome lots of problems, and it's very normal, right? So with that, let's see if anybody has any questions.
I did text in a question and then I have like a follow-up one as well, but I don't want to take all the time. So I'll see if other people jump in. So the first thing is like, what if you're scheduling, or we had someone at Peace that is just like working on the scheduling part. But then like week after week, the person just isn't moving towards the thing that they scheduled.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess as you were talking and I was like understanding some more of the concepts, it seemed like maybe doing more of the activities in session could like support that, but I'm just wondering what your thoughts are.
So you're totally right. And thanks for asking these questions. Is that doing it together, you just see the benefit, right? Like I could say, hey guys, everybody here, how about this? Tomorrow we should go for a walk, right? You'll feel better. And everybody will be like, sure. And then if I text all of you guys tomorrow, you'd be like, you really get to go for a walk, right? Whereas if all of us went for a walk right now, we go, ugh, isn't it nice to get out, especially in the isolation, get out of the house, do that. That was great. What about tomorrow? Then we all do it together, right? And then we're more likely to do it. And so, yeah, doing stuff, having them experience it right then and there because they can see the benefit and then see the value of it later. If people are, there's sort of, I'm going to say there's sort of two big culprits. I'm sure there was more. There's usually two big culprits when we're talking about somebody who schedules activity and then doesn't follow through with it. So the first culprit is this. is we're scheduling too many activities. So we're saying, well, what if you go for a walk and clean your room and play some video games and call your friend and go out with your brother and make some dinner? And they're like, yeah. And then they're like, then they see it when they get home and they go, that's a lot. Like, I'm never going to get through. Why try? It's not going to work out anyway. And so usually when that happens, those are times when I say, okay, less. I mean, I'd rather somebody tomorrow go for a walk and that's all they do all week. And then we see, oh, did that feel better? So what if we do it more? Right. So it means that we may be putting too much. So if we're scheduling, I like to say, it's not an activity itinerary. It's an activity schedule. So an activity itinerary is like if it's 5 o'clock, you're in the Louvre. If it's 5:15, you're at Notre Dame, right? Like, so it's like, for our individuals, less is going to be more. The other thing is sometimes the things we're scheduling feel like they're accomplishable, but they may be like really big leaps, right? So, you're going to go and apply for a job. And it seems pretty easy. Like we've all applied for jobs. But for some people, they go, oh, I really like the idea of applying for a job, but it stresses me out, right? And so it's too big. So we might want to break it down to smaller things like, are there, maybe like, let's look together online at places you might want to work. And then what about just downloading the application or saving the application site onto your like web browser, right? So breaking it down to really small things that they might want to do. The last wing, I knew it wasn't going to be two, is that if it's not attached to their aspiration, it's just saying to do more stuff. So one time I was running a group, and I really broke down this idea of like everybody in the group talked about some sort of like vacation, going to an island. Everybody was like really enamored with going to an island. And so we started like, once everybody talked about like what kind of car they'd rent, where they'd want to go, what kind of all that stuff. Once they all started to break that information down, we got down to like getting up at the same time and going out every day at the same time. And this super flat young guy goes, whoa, if you're saying I could get one step closer to going to an island if I got up at the same time every day, I can do that, right? Because it's super small, but it gets him closer to where he wants to go. And he did. He started becoming more active and started doing all of this stuff. But he kind of saw the connection between the thing he wants and these small steps that he's going to take right now. So it's really making sure the rationale's on board. So how does that sound, Maria?
Yeah, that's super helpful. I'm going to share all that with the team. I think that that's like right on point, and definitely could be helpful. The second part is just like with the virus happening, what we're hearing a lot is like, I love the get up and go, right? Like the more energy at the beginning, and then we kind of focus that. But people are saying like, I'm going to get bored during the day, or I'm not going to have things to do. So why like get up in the morning, or why are we, it's kind of, I don't know if this is like, there is anything to do with that, right? Because you are limited with where you're going out during the day and stuff, but that is just so much of what we're hearing right now.
Yeah.
And it's really pushing us back. I don't know if you haven't, like, how would we frame that conversation?
So so I'd probably start that with a real like very normalizing statement. And in the place I would go personally with it is I'd go, it's interesting what you're talking about right now is something that I've addressed in a lot of webinars to just like regular people on mental wellness during this stuff. We are bored. And so one of the things that people can do during this time is there's lots of stuff that we never have time to do or we never get around to doing. And what are the things that you want to do, right? It might have to do with maybe you wanted to, learn something. Maybe you wanted to read a book. Maybe you wanted to go for a walk. Maybe you wanted to train your dog to do something. Maybe whatever those things are. And we can schedule those times in to do those things, and what are some things you want to do? Like, listen, if your family's at home with you now, it's a time that you could do things with your family that you don't get to normally do, and schedule those things in. Also then looking at the benefit of, it's kind of like if I had diabetes, exercise, I might go like, why get up and start exercising right now? I'm not going to the beach this year anyway. But at the end of the day, it's sort of like, for me, if I stay really inactive, I feel way, way worse, right? Just like a person with diabetes, if they really, really get out of shape, they're going to feel way, way worse. And so ultimately going like, listen, but there's this sort of like wonderful two parts of it going, and that's for every single person, right? This NAMI thing that the fabulous Kat Conroy pointed out, I think a third or a half of what I talked about in this NAMI thing had to do with staying active, right? So it wasn't, I didn't come up with, for NAMI, it wasn't, and this is mental wellness. It wasn't about like all these other things for people who are okay. It's the same thing. Get up, schedule your activities, pay attention to which activities are better, which activities are worse, right? So those would be sort of my thoughts. And then go, yeah, you might be bored, So, so is that helpful?
Yeah, very. It's definitely like a challenging conversation right now. It's definitely impacting like a lot of the stuff, but it's impacting all of us.
Yeah.
And I also totally get it. So, but yeah, that is very helpful for framing the
Good.
conversation.
Cool. Yeah, no, I mean, I was really lucky. I had found two jars of active dry yeast, like early on in this thing, because it got wiped out the first round of it. And then I came back through and there were like jars and jars. So I grabbed 2 jars of active dry yeast. So I've been able to bake. But it's hard, so take care. Be well. And I'm Dr. Aaron Brinen of the Department of Clinical Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at Vanderbilt University. Thank you so much. See you next time.